Hello, my name is Ed Brown, Managing Director at the American Academy of Advanced Thinking and your host for Insights in Education. Today I will be speaking with professor, author, marketing consultant, and thought leader Dorie Clark. Our talk is titled Entrepreneurial You, How to Monetize Your Expertise and Become an Education Thought Leader. Just a little about Dorie. Dorie Clark is an adjunct professor at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business and the author of Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Standout, which was named the #1 leadership book of 2015 by Inc. magazine. A former presidential campaign spokeswoman, the New York Times described her as an expert at self-reinvention and helping others make changes in their lives. A frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review, she consults and speaks for clients including Google, Microsoft, and the World Bank. Welcome, Dorie, to Insights in Education.
Ed, thanks for having me.
Dorie, what was the inspiration for your latest book, Entrepreneurial You?
Well, Ed, I was interested in really tackling a situation that I saw around me a lot, because my previous book, Standout, was about how to become a recognized expert in your field. And I think that is a critically important element in today's society. I mean, we all know that there's so much competition out there. It's really essential if you want to build a successful and thriving career to ensure that other people really understand what you bring to the table and know that you are good at what you do and want to seek you out. But as I was touring around and talking to people about it, I came to realize that there's another step beyond that. There's one more factor to the challenges that people face in building a really successful career, which is that we probably all know plenty of people that are very talented, they are good at what they do, they have a lot to contribute, and yet they have trouble actually making money from what they're doing. And so I wanted to write Entrepreneurial You as a way of really breaking that down and demystifying it. And so I interviewed 50-plus very successful 6- and 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs to try to go in depth to look at their business models, their income streams, and really break it down so that regular professionals can understand, hey, here's how I might be able to apply that in my own life and in my own business.
Okay. Now, were there any particularly insightful takeaways from the 50-plus entrepreneurs that you observed that would apply to educators?
Well, I think that one of the key ones, one of the foundational ones, which I think has a lot of crossover with educators, is the growing understanding in the world of entrepreneurship that it is necessary to test and iterate. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. One sort of case study that I have is about a guy named Danny Iny who decided that he wanted to create an online course. And of course, this is close to the heart of many educators. We are increasingly seeing the possibility of digital learning and e-learning. It's becoming a more and more prevalent trend, but people are still kind of figuring out how to do it. And so Danny, in his first attempt at creating an online course, kind of did it the old-fashioned way. He spent all this time creating the perfect course, and he just was tinkering and perfecting it. It was literally everything that he thought that people needed to know about marketing, and he put it out there, and one person bought a copy, and it was just totally depressing. And so it took him a while to kind of recover from that and decide to try again. But when he did finally try again, he realized he never wanted that to happen again. He wanted to somehow mitigate against that risk. And so he tried something different, which has actually become very influential in the world of online course launches. And that is that prior to creating anything, aside from just a concept, he reached out to his audience, sent them an email, and said, hey guys, I am thinking about creating an online course. I want to see if people are actually interested in this. If you are, you can sign on to be a beta tester, and you can get in at a discounted rate in exchange for giving me feedback about what you like and don't like in the course. Are you interested? And in this case, people actually were interested, and they signed up. But what was so powerful was he hadn't created anything. He hadn't wasted time putting something together that it might turn out that no one wanted. He stuck a toe in the water, saw what people wanted and then was able to move toward that. And so I think that's really the key. It's understanding what your audience wants, getting clear on their needs, approaching them to see if they would actually be willing to do the real test, which is putting money down for something, and only when you have that validation, really going in and creating something fully. So I think that concept of testing and iteration is very applicable to educators, to anyone thinking about online courses. And I also just want to mention, too, that one of the cornerstones for me in writing Entrepreneurial You is the belief that you don't the value of monetizing your expertise and building these multiple revenue streams. It's not just for people that are full-time entrepreneurs. In fact, if you are a full-time educator, it's perhaps even more critical for you to think about side income streams that you could develop, because it just gives you an extra insurance policy in your career. It gives you a chance to mitigate any financial shocks, plus the chance to earn more money and learn new skills on the side. So I think that's really the way that our economy is going in the future.
I think that's huge. I think it's a great point. In line with that, when did you notice or observe in the marketplace that there was a greater need for thought leaders and self-proclaimed experts more now than ever?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest changes that we've seen in the past couple of decades with the rise of the internet is that previously everything, any means of communication that people had, if it's newspapers, if it's television, all the old school ways that before, let's say 1995, people were able to be reached, you had to really be anointed by a gatekeeper. An editor, a producer, etc., had to be interested enough in what you said that they would they'd say, "Oh, well, great. Let's put Ed on TV." And once you were put on TV, then fantastic for you. People would start to hear you, and there weren't that many options back then in terms of their media consumption. So you could probably get pretty well known. But the challenge is that there are a lot of really valid and important viewpoints that the gatekeepers wouldn't necessarily have recognized or have known that the public wanted or needed. And what has really been powerful is that with the rise of the internet, more and more people are able to put themselves forward and say, wait a minute, I think I have something to contribute. And you're able to serve a lot more niches. There might not be enough people in your particular audience that you're trying to reach. Let's say it's teaching math to autistic teenagers or whatever. That's not going to be a big enough audience that they're going to want to put you on the Today Show. Mm-hmm. But the people who care about that really care about that. And so the amazing thing about the internet is that you can really, if you create good content and put it out there regularly, become a recognized expert in your niche.
That's you know what? One of the things we talked about in our previous conversation that it stuck with me is that you started out, I believe, merely blogging for about 2 years. And I like to hear the backstory, if you would, because I think this is key for listeners. When did you get your first break as a thought leader? When did you, with all your efforts, finally see that all that work was come to fruition? And I ask that question because a lot of times people want to know, when do you finally become a thought leader? When do you finally arrive? What was your first break?
Yeah, this is an important question because I think we all know intellectually. I mean, we've all heard it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, right. But in the moment, in the lived experience, it's like, come on already.
Right.
How long is this going to take?
Right.
So having some perspective about other people's situations can be extremely powerful. So in my particular case, I started blogging pretty regularly in 2010, and it did take a while. I had originally wanted to publish a book. I got really hot on the prospect of that in 2009, and all of my book proposals got turned down. I created multiple ones, basically because I kept hearing again and again, well, you're not famous enough, too bad. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and find a way to get better known. And so blogging was the vehicle that I chose. And so 2010, I started blogging pretty regularly. And the good news is that I would say, maybe a year later, I was able to actually get something that you really could call a good break. Of course, I've been trying to connect with publications for even longer than that. I really sort of started in 2009, didn't get accepted by any of them until 2010. But in late 2010, I wrote a piece for the Harvard Business Review, a blog post called "How to Reinvent Your Personal Brand," and that became a popular piece. And they asked me if I would turn it into a longer piece for the Harvard Business Review magazine. And so I did. And when that came out, I realized that actually was something that really was a good break, a lucky break, because I had several literary agents reach out to me and ask if I had thought about turning it into a book and was I interested in being represented. And after hitting so many walls and being rejected so many times, I realized, oh, this is what it feels like when you have momentum. And,
wow.
And so I was, in fact, able to get a book contract and get published. That became my first book, Reinventing You. But it came directly from the blogging. It was a direct line.
Okay, so and I'm going to get back to your book in a quick moment. Would you say that your journey, trajectory to finally break ground, was it a question of just staying at it for, in this case, a year blogging, or because what do they say, when preparation meets luck is when preparation meets opportunity? Was it more that, or did you reach out differently to other people who were quote unquote gatekeepers, or was it just a matter of being relentless?
Well, it's a great question, and it definitely was both. I knew that I wanted to start blogging for hopefully high-profile publications. That was an explicit goal of mine. And so I had spent months reaching out and trying to pitch myself to different organizations, different magazines and such. And I tried many, many different channels. So I was extremely deliberate. In order to break in at the Huffington Post, I contacted about 6 different people that I knew that had connections there to see if any of them could help me and if any of them could make an introduction. I tried to break in at Fast Company. I had 3, 4 different people that I knew with various connections, and so I tried to leverage all of that to get in and get noticed. I tried to get picked up at Inc. magazine. I was not having luck. Eventually, I did finally get accepted by the Huffington Post, but I was working on these things, many of them fruitlessly, and then something that actually was a really lucky opportunity came my way, which is that I lived in Boston at the time, and I ended up selling my bike on Craigslist, just totally random, and it turned out that the woman who bought my bike was an employee at the Harvard Business Review. Huh. And she was not an editor, but she knew the editors, and so I asked her if she might be willing to make an introduction, and she was. And, of course, even that didn't necessarily come easily. I had to follow up with her multiple times, and then I had to follow up with the editor multiple times. But eventually I got him to look at my stuff, and he liked my stuff, and that was how I first was able to get started publishing there.
Wow. Interesting. So the bike got you in.
Correct. Yes.
Fascinating. Entrepreneurial You, you talk about how to monetize one's expertise. For an educator trying to determine what he or she can do to become a mandarin or a crusader for that one solution they have or solutions, how would you suggest using Entrepreneurial You as a backdrop that an educator find their niche or find their topic or find that passion that they can actually serve as a crusade?
Yeah, so if you're looking to identify kind of what your big idea is, if you're sort of in the more preliminary stages of it, then I would actually recommend my previous book, Stand Out, which focuses pretty squarely on this. The subtitle of Standout is How to Find Your Breakthrough Idea and Build a Following Around It. And so it kind of walks people step by step through really thinking about their perspective on their field and their industry and how to determine what you're seeing that other people aren't and shape and hone that idea. But if you are at the place where you're pretty sure you know what it is and you want to make money, then that's where Entrepreneurial You can come in, because I break down different potential income streams in great detail and talk about ways that you can use them either to build your brand and or to make money from them. And that could include anything from podcasting to blogging to creating online membership communities, hosting live events, doing online courses. All of those things have very in-depth chapters talking about case studies and best practices.
Most definitely, and I like the fact that at the end of each chapter, you actually said try this, and they are how-to. So it's just not just a book of just merely reading. It's actually a guide or tutorial to walk individuals through trying certain things that actually give them the breakthrough they're looking for. So I definitely give you kudos for that particular process of adding that to the mix.
Thank you. Yeah.
What did you discover through the process of writing Entrepreneurial You that you didn't know before?
So for me, one of the biggest learnings from writing Entrepreneurial You, I very much had my own agenda in writing the book, which is that I was interested in exploring new revenue streams, particularly online courses. And I realized that I could do a far better job if I had the wisdom and guidance of people who had already done it before and might be able to offer some perspective. And so I used Entrepreneurial You as an excuse in many ways to reach out and have detailed conversations with the people that I respected most. I figured, I can learn from it, I can test it out, and then I could share that knowledge with other people. And so I really used myself as a guinea pig. And over the course of 2016, I did the interviews in the beginning of 2016 and then spent the rest of the year implementing it so that I could see what worked, what didn't, and report back in the book on my progress. And so I'm really pleased to say that I was able to pilot my online course that year and then ultimately launch it in the fall. And it was tremendously successful. 150 people have now been through my Recognized Expert course. And directly as a result of applying the techniques that I learned in the course of researching Entrepreneurial You, I was able to earn an additional $193,000 in 2016 as compared to the year before. So the techniques really can work, and I was excited to kind of put them to the test as I wrote the book.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And what's the best way for people to contact you as the book is about to be launched and released in a couple weeks, actually?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, if people are interested in diving in and learning more, one great way actually is that I have a free resource that I can share with people. It is the 88-question Entrepreneurial You self-assessment, which actually walks people through the process of how to think about and create multiple income streams in their own business, in their own life. And they can get it for free at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur. And of course, the book is Entrepreneurial You, and that's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and lots of other smart bookstores.
Well, I'll be one of the first ones to say that is a great book. I definitely encourage readers to not only just read it, but actually study it, because there, again, is a lot of chock full of information and takeaways that I think anyone building education or otherwise can actually learn from your best practices. Thank you, Dorie, for being a guest on Insights in Education. Is there anything for the good of order that you'd like to leave us with?
This is great. Thank you so much, Ed. I'm so glad to have the chance to talk with you. And I guess the last thing that I would just say for the educators that are listening is that it's really, even though education is one of the places that in our current economy may be considered the most secure, in the sense that that many teachers might have tenure or these long-term union contracts if they're working in public schools, education is still facing massive changes as an institution. The rise of digital, the rise of the internet is changing how it is delivered and what is possible. And so it's this moment of change. And when that happens, if you are at the vanguard of seizing the opportunity, it really presents new and interesting possibilities. And so taking an entrepreneurial mindset to it, both just in terms of how you're thinking generally and looking for opportunities to build your own business models into it and perhaps create multiple income streams for yourself, can be a very powerful way to make sure that you're staying ahead of the curve rather than behind it.
Chock full information again. Get the book. Thank you, Dorie, for being on Insights in Education. This is Ed Brown for another episode. Signing out.